welcome back to the Hirshhorn Museum Sculpture Garden's 2011 summer camp. Sauceriferous is what it's known as this year. As Jenny said, I'm Dave Wilt. My job is to make these movies and myself seem important. No, not really. Actually, I'm here to provide some background information and context, especially since every film has a story behind it. And sometimes those stories are even more interesting than the ones that are up on the screen. However, that's not true for tonight's movie, the 1953 version of The War of the Worlds. I mean, the backstory is fairly interesting, but the movie itself is also darn good, and it's in color, which is a rarity for this year's Summer Camp Film Festival. The War of the Worlds is, as the title suggests, an alien invasion movie. In the 1990s and beyond, we started getting movies like Independence Day, Mars Attacks, and things like that. And more recently, there was the remake of The War of the Worlds, plus Battle of Los Angeles, Skyline, and so on. But prior to that point, there were relatively few movies showing mass alien invasions. Most of the time, the alien invaders were limited to one flying saucer, sometimes just one alien, with the excuse that, you know, these were scouts or advanced or spies or doing scientific research, or they crash landed, or even that the aliens were ambassadors or something like we saw last week. There were obvious budgetary reasons for this, since in the pre-CGI special effects days, it cost a lot of money to show masses of flying saucers, big battles, widespread destruction, and so forth. However, there are also valid narrative reasons for a circumscribed, sort of up-close alien invasion. If you've got one invader interacting with a small group of people, there are greater opportunities for the kind of dramatic conflict and character development that's not necessarily available in these big-scale invasion movies. Tonight's film tries to have it both ways, showing not only a mass invasion and destruction, hooray, but it also focuses on the main character, Dr. Clayton Forrester, and his reaction to the alien attack. So it both has scope of destruction, invasion, and a personal story. The War of the Worlds not only is one of the earliest alien invasion movies, but it was also one of the earliest mass alien invasion novels. The original book was written by H.G. Wells and published in 1898. There was a genre of literature at the time called invasion literature, which told fictional tales of the invasion of England, usually, by other countries, whichever country England wasn't getting along with at the time. And eventually invasion literature spread to other countries as well, including the United States. Now, some of these novels can be characterized as science fiction, since futuristic weapons, including aircraft, are utilized, but the majority of the early examples of invasion literature portray real-life political adversaries rather than otherworldly foes. And that's where H.G. Wells came in. Interestingly enough, the original novel, The War of the Worlds, suggests that the Martians only invade England. So it's not so much The War of the Worlds as Mars attacks the United Kingdom. For obvious reasons, many of the later versions, the adaptations, relocated the actual initial invasion point. The radio version in 1938 had the Martians landing in New Jersey. The movie we'll see tonight brings them first to California. These versions usually also suggest the invasion is worldwide rather than localized to a specific country. H.G. Wells' novel was very popular. It's been reprinted many times in various languages, and it quickly inspired a number of imitations. Paramount Pictures purchased the film rights to Wells' novel in the 1920s. Although a story treatment was actually written at the time, they didn't make a movie. And in fact, in the 1930s, both directors Alfred Hitchcock and Sergei Eisenstein were reportedly interested in filming the project, but the films never developed. One of the unique aspects of the novel, The War of the Worlds, is the description of the Martian war machines as gigantic walking tanks with three tall, stilt-like legs. Although airplanes were still in their infancy when Wells wrote the novel, other speculative fiction had employed airships and even spacecraft. But instead, Wells had the Martians shot to Earth from Mars in shells or capsules and rather than giving them their own self-propelled spaceships, and then had them try to conquer the Earth with walking rather than flying machines. Aside from the 1953 film version we're going to see tonight, almost all of the other media adaptations of The War of the Worlds, including the 2005 movie remake, have used the tripod machine concept that's sort of associated with Wells and The War of the Worlds. In October 1938, the novel, which as I said was published in 1898, suddenly got a new lease on life when Orson Welles, who at the time was only 23 years old, produced a radio adaptation of The War of the Worlds. The radio show was presented in a format which simulated news bulletins and reportedly confused some listeners who thought they were hearing about an actual invasion of the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York.
Professor Pearson, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton, bringing you a special interview with Professor Pearson, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We are returning you now to our New York studio.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of Macmillan University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer home, comes a special bulletin from Trenton, New Jersey. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Wait a minute, something's happening. Some shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. He strikes them head on. Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the cars, the gas tanks of the automobiles spreading everywhere. Coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity.
Despite the notoriety of that broadcast, Paramount Pictures apparently had no interest in filming the novel again at the time. Few science fiction films were actually made in the 1940s, and it may have also been thought that at the time when we were involved in a real-life world war, that it might not have been in good taste, or that people might not necessarily be interested in a film about a fictional invasion from somewhere else. However, late in 1951, things were different, and the project was resurrected by producer George Powell.